Today I want to show you how I make and how I preserve my homemade beans. Or you can call them baked beans if you're going to be baking them, but I don't bake them, so I'm just going to call them my homemade beans. But before I start, I just want to address my new kitchen. So if you have never seen my kitchen before, this is not what it used to look like. Go check out some other videos, some of the older videos, if you want to have an idea what my kitchen looked like. But I want to introduce you to my new kitchen, which I am quite happy about. It's lacking a little bit in decoration and a little bit of style right now, but it'll get there. So you may see bits of my old kitchen in this video because like my kitchen, this video was a work in progress. So anyway, I hope you like the new changes. So let's get started. So like with most beans, the first thing that you need to do is to make sure that you thoroughly rinse your beans before you even start. So you want to give them a good rinse in the sink under some cool water and pick out any discolored beans that you may find in the mix. So I have a fairly small crock pot, so I'm using about 2 cups of beans in my slow cooker because I'm not baking them, I'm putting in my slow cooker. It fits about 2 cups of beans. Once your beans have been thoroughly rinsed, the next step to do is to leave them alone. So you need to fill a pot or your slow cooker with your beans, adding some water at a good level above the beans because the beans are going to soak up the water. I let them soak overnight. That's my favorite way to do them. If you don't have time or if you forgot to soak them, what you can do is for every 1 cup of dry beans, you're going to add 3 cups of water. You're going to boil that for 2 minutes, and then you're going to soak those beans in the same liquid for 1 hour. Once the hour is up, you're going to drain your beans, but make sure to reserve that liquid. That's what you're going to use to make your sauce. Now, making your beans is all a question of personal preference. As usual, you're supposed to follow a recipe, but when you're adding spices and flavorings and syrups and molasses and things like that, you can kind of do it a little bit by your personal preference. You just have to make sure to respect the processing time recommended for the product that you're making. So to my beans, what I put in, I add half a cup of salted pork. And because I'm using salted pork, you got to be really careful with the salt. So you may want to wait till the end to see if it tastes salty enough and salt as required. If you're not using a salted pork, be sure to make sure to salt them well with at least, I'd say, 1 tablespoon of pickling salt. Remember, we're going to be pressure canning this, so we have to be using our pickling salt. I also add to my beans 2 to 3 tablespoons of molasses, 2 to 3 tablespoons of maple syrup, 1 teaspoon of dried mustard, and 1/4 cup of brown sugar. You want to mix all these ingredients together well. And like I said, I'm cooking them in a slow cooker. Just to give you an example, if I'm cooking my beans to eat right away, in my slow cooker, they take somewhere around 12 hours to be really soft. But I want to undercook them slightly so they don't turn to mush when I pressure can them. I am going to be checking them periodically, and I don't want them to be hard, but I don't want them to be extremely soft anyways. If you're not putting them in a pressure canner and you want to bake your beans, you're going to want to put them in the oven at 350 degrees and bake them somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 hours. Just same thing, make sure that you test them to see that they're not getting overly cooked so they don't turn into a mush. Unless you like beans that are basically deconstructed or really soft, then go ahead. Once your beans are cooked, all there's left to do really is to put them in the jars and to pressure can them. Make sure you have your pressure canner on your stove with the amount of water in, starting to heat up so you're not putting your hot jars in a cold pressure canner. So now let's get started. So you are going to ladle your beans in your jars, leaving a 1-inch headspace. I am using 500 milliliter jars, so the pint-sized jars. You can use the quart-sized jars or the 1-liter jars if you prefer. Make sure that you have a good amount of liquid in each one of your jars because the beans, since they're only partially cooked, are going to absorb more of the liquid. If you don't like a dry bean, make sure that there's lots of liquids in there. Once you've ladled all your beans into your jars, you're going to make sure to wipe your rims down with vinegar because we are using meat inside of our jars. So you're going to give the rims of the jars a good wipe with vinegar, and then place your cap on top of your jars. I'm still warming my caps. So I'm going to place my warm caps on top of my jars and then add the rings on as usual, fingertip tight. Once I've done this with all my jars, I'm going to transfer the jars over inside the canner. I only had a small batch of beans. I've only got 4 jars, but that's great. It's a good start. Once all the jars are in your canner, you're going to place the cover on your canner, and then you're going to turn up the heat to bring this all to a boil. Once your canner has come to a good hard boil, what you want to do is vent your pot. So the button is going to come up, and that's going to indicate that it's actually at a good point to start venting. So you want to vent your pot at this time for 10 minutes. Once the 10 minutes is up, it's time to put the weighted gauge and build the pressure inside of the canner. So for me, I need to build the pressure to 11 pounds of pressure. Be sure to check at what altitude you're at to ensure that you bring your pot to the correct pounds of pressure for the region that you live in. After you put the weighted gauge, you're going to see that your pressure is going to increase. This kind of goes up surprisingly fast, so be sure to always keep a close watch on your pressure canner. You don't want the pressure to go up too high. Once your canner has reached 11 pounds of pressure, you're going to process your 500 milliliter jars, your pint-sized jars, for 80 minutes. Once the time is up, you're going to turn off the heat, and if you can, if it's not too heavy, move your canner over to another unheated element on your stove. So once your pressure is at 0 and the button has dropped, you're going to remove the weighted gauge. And you're going to wait another 10 minutes before you attempt to remove the cover. Once the 10 minutes is up, it's safe to remove the cover, but don't take the jars out of the canner right away. You need to let the jars sit in the canner again for another 10 minutes. Don't rush the process. Once the 10 minutes are up, it is now safe to remove the jars from the canner. Once you have removed your jars from your canner, you really need to let them sit. Do not touch them for 24 hours, leave them alone. You want them to seal properly. Once the 24 hours are up, you can check your seals, make sure your jars have properly sealed. You want to remove your rings from your jars. Never store them with the rings on top. It can create a false seal, which would lead to a very unsafe product. So remove your rings. And also don't forget to write on top of the jars at least which year you canned them, because sometimes some things may stay in your pantry a lot longer than you really expected that they would. So make sure you mark down the year. You can safely store your jars in a cool, dry, dark environment for up to a year. They'll be really good even after a year. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my content. If you do, give it a big thumbs up. Don't be shy. Feel free to subscribe. And be sure to check back again soon to see what other content I'll have coming out.